RCTV Studios offers quality summer programs for kids and teens. These programs are ideal for the budding actors and actresses of the world, as well as the future directors, sound engineers, and more. Students receive training on the most up-to-date studio equipment around, from high-definition cameras, chroma key, and Final Cut Pro, just to name a few. Workshops are available for kids and teens ages 10 to 17 and range from stop-motion animation to music videos, TV production, and filmmaking. For more information, visit www.rctv.org.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Candidate Forum. This is RCTV. My name is Alan Foles, and I'll be moderating the discussion. We have 4 candidates for 2 seats on the Board of Library Trustees. The incumbent is MONETTE VERRIER, and the challengers are Brian Curry, Christian CAPPY POPP, and Michael Terry. To ask questions of the candidates, please welcome Catherine Robertson of the Reading Post. Now let's go over the ground rules. This is how things will work. Each candidate will be invited to make an opening statement of no more than 2 minutes. All questions are of a non-personal nature and answerable by all candidates. Candidates have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Additionally, each candidate will receive 2 opportunities for rebuttal to be used during the course of the forum. These rebuttals are no more than 1 minute each. You can use those at any time, but remember, you have 2. We have a timekeeper who will display a yellow sheet when there are 30 seconds left and a red sheet when it is time to stop. The moderator will rotate first responders for each question. Each candidate will be invited to make a 2-minute closing statement, and we'll use the same order as we did at the opening. We had a drawing earlier to determine that order. RCTV will show the event live on television. It will be streamed live as well, and it is being recorded to be shown until Election Day on Tuesday, April 4th. You can watch the forums on RCTV's Public Access channel. That's Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 31 or 2131. And I think we are all set to start. So according to our drawing, we will begin with MONETTE VERRIER.
Thank you, Mr. Folds. Thank you, RCTV and the Reading Post, for this opportunity. My name is MONETTE VERRIER, and I am excited to run for re-election to the Board of Library Trustees. I was appointed to the board in 2018, re-elected in 2020, and I once again seek Reading voters' support for re-election so that I can continue to champion the great work of our library. My husband Peter and I moved to Reading in 1996, settling into the community to raise our 2 daughters. As a resident, I have continuously volunteered my time and energy to improve our town. I was a founding member of Parents for Educational Progress, a grassroots organization that supported school building projects over many years: RMHS renovation, Barrows renovation, and Wood End School new construction. I am a former town meeting member. I spent 10 years volunteering in the Wood End School Library. I worked diligently as part of the Library Ballot Committee in 2014 to champion the incredible facility we have today. In addition, I have been a longtime volunteer at the Reading Food Pantry and spent many years teaching CCD at St. Agnes. I am a graduate of the College of the Holy Cross, and after a period of time as a stay-at-home parent, I have built a fulfilling career in human resources with a focus on hiring, employee development, retention, and conflict resolution. I believe that our library is and should continue to be a welcoming place for all, providing a collection and programming that is robust and inclusive with something that appeals to everyone. I am fiercely supportive and proud of our library staff and the tireless effort they give to support this ideal, planning and implementing over 500 programs in FY22, managing physical item circulation of 343,000, and electronic content use of 176,000. During my tenure on the board, the staff resourcefully navigated the pandemic, created the RPL app, expanded outreach, adding a dementia-friendly collection, purchased the library book bike, and provided lockers, enabling access to materials beyond library hours. I will continue to tirelessly support the RPL's core values of education, equity, accountability, and access. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For our second opening statement, we have CAPPY POPP.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here tonight. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is CAPPY POPP, and the reason I'm running for Bolt is I strongly support the core values of RPL that include education, equity, accountability, and access. I'm an 11-year Reading resident, currently serving my first of a 3-year term on Reading Town Meeting. I have 2 lovely preschool-age kids and a wife that's been grateful enough to allow me out tonight to join you guys here tonight. I have a varied professional background, which I believe will be of great benefit to Bolt. I've been a professional software engineer for over 20 years. I'm currently co-founder and principal consultant of Thought Labs, a digital marketing and analytics firm that has worked with some of the largest businesses in the world to find, interact with, and of course analyze audiences online. I've also written a very successful book on Facebook development, and to that end have developed apps that at their peak had millions of daily active users. To that end, that means I deeply understand the technology of today, understand the risks, the biases it's engendered in all of us, the dangers it's risen, but also the opportunities that it provides for all of us. And I think that experience will help Bolt and Reading Public Library in its future digitally forward-thinking aspects and processes. My priority for Bolt is to help the director of the library. That's my primary goal. But also, I want to serve as an independent voice on the panel. I've been an independent voter since the day I registered. I'm going to use logic, data, and reason to guide all my decisions. I believe one thing I've learned as a consultant for over 20 years is that change does not happen without collaboration and dialogue, and I'm going to work tirelessly with both sides of the aisle to come to consensus that benefits our community and our library as a whole. Thank you for your time, your interest, and consideration. I ask for your trust. I ask for your vote. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And for our third opening statement, Brian Curry.
Thank you, RCTV, for having the event this evening, and thank you for the other candidates for running and donating your time. We're all volunteers, and we're all doing the best we can to contribute to the community. As mentioned, my name is Brian Curry, and I've lived in Reading since 2019 with my wife and 2 young daughters. I have a degree in government and legal studies and a minor in education from Bowdoin College. I'm a licensed educator and a former international teacher. I've taught preschool through high school. I've been a coach, an athletic director, and I'm still a coach in town for my daughter's soccer teams. In addition, I have 15 years in business. I have an MBA from Babson, and I'm a financial planner and advisor. I am well-versed in working with people with other backgrounds and cultures and have nearly 4 years of lived international experience between Taiwan and Australia. I'm running for Bolt because I want to have a positive impact on the community. I'm mindful of the residents' taxes and will focus on being fiscally responsible, and I will help the library continue in the tradition of educating and developing our children while being an institution that represents our shared community values. Some of my goals for Bolt include increasing town participation in the library, increasing events and programs for all ages, as well as reviewing policies and procedures in an effort to improve transparency. In regards to policies, all of the other elected committees in town have their meetings recorded for public viewing, but Bolt does not. Secondly, as a parent, if you want to volunteer as a coach or you want to volunteer at your child's school, you have a Corey check done. But at the library, they do not do Corey checks for non-library staff for volunteers. These policies may be justified, but they need to be examined, discussed, and reevaluated, which I plan on doing. I respectfully ask for your vote and believe the residents of Reading should vote for me because I'm well-rounded between my education background and my time spent as a teacher and my time in business. I'm also an independent, registered as an independent voter, so I think it's very important to work collaboratively. I think it's very important to be fiscally responsible, but also improving programs and participation with the library. And lastly, I will advocate for our children and community and always make decisions that are in the best interest of our children and Reading shared values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Michael Terry.
Good evening. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Phil, here at RCTV, as well as Katie Robertson, our questioner, and my fellow candidates, MONETTE, CAPPY, and Brian. We have a terrific library here in Reading. We can access books, magazines, films, etc., not just from our own library, but from libraries across the Northeast and even nationally. There are computers and printers that are readily available, and meeting space is comfortable and flexible. The building is very well maintained, and the staff is friendly and helpful. Still, we can make our library even better. Let's make sure that the library is aligned with the values of the town. Certainly, there's a diversity of values in Reading, but sometimes it appears that just one side is emphasized at the expense of the other. We must insist on full fiscal transparency in the library. It appears unclear the extent to which funds from the Friends of Reading Library are used for library programs and expenses. As Brian said, Bolt meetings should be filmed and recorded, just as other committees here in town are. Anyone presenting at the library should be Corey checked, especially those presenting to children. Anyone who's coached or been a scout leader or involved in their church here in town knows that these are critical and required. We should publicize programs more broadly. One suggestion is to use a notice board similar to what the Reading Drama Club has on Main Street or the town itself has on the Common. Finally, we should make the library space more available. I know that the elder group has had a hard time getting space recently, and I'd like to see that more available. There's plenty of space in the library for all to use. As background, my wife and I moved to Reading nearly 40 years ago, shortly after finishing college. Monette, you and I have them bracketed. I'm Boston College, so we have them bracketed with Jesuit graduates. Our two children went through Reading Public Schools. We've been invested in the town in many ways. I've coached youth soccer and basketball. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now go into the questioning portion. As I stated earlier, I will mix up the order, so it will be a different order each time for answering the questions. So, Catherine Robertson, if you begin with the first question.
Great, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. So we'll start off with, what would you say is the most important function of a library trustee?
And we'll begin with Monette.
So I think that, I don't actually think, I know that the role of a library trustee is threefold, and this is as stated in the bylaws, which is shared on our library website for full transparency. The first is custody and management of the library, which is the actual property and the budget. The second is appointing a qualified library director, and the third are the library policies. So monthly, we sit down and we review the budget, and the director gives us a financial report of the $2 million of town funds, plus the additional $600,000 that we receive through state aid and various donation vehicles. We sign off on our invoices twice a month, so we have fiduciary responsibility. The physical building is also in our purview, so things like the recent revamp of the Friends of Library book sale room had to be approved by the trustees. We're responsible for hiring a qualified library director. We hire the director hires the staff. A solid management philosophy, which my fellow trustees and I agree on, is hire good people and listen to them. They are the experts on programming and materials and outreach and identifying what our community needs and what our community wants. They have library degrees, they have the background and education in this field, and we pay them for their expertise. And we don't want to trump their decisions. And the third is our library policies. With the director's support and guidance, we have a 12-month review cycle for all policies. We diligently review and discuss each policy every single year and make appropriate changes.
Thank you. Same question, Brian Curry.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think there are many key functions for the library trustees. I think, as you've heard tonight, we have very qualified candidates, and I think working collaboratively with the other trustees, working well with the library staff is a key component. We all have great ideas, but we have better ideas when we work together, so I think that's a key component. I think listening to the experts, as Monette said, is also critical. We do have library staff and a library director, and they are well-versed in doing this full-time, whereas we are volunteers and contributing to the board, so I think listening to them. I think it's also very important to listen to the town and listen to the residents of Reading. We, as a community on the board, but also the library, it's a service for the residents. So I think it's very important that we understand, do surveys, be proactive. There's a lot of great resources at the library, but I also think, like anything, there's possible ways to improve that, and the best way to do that is to get feedback from the residents and feedback from the community on what can be improved. Thank you.
Thank you. Third, let's see, CAPPY.
Thank you so much. Yes, I believe that primary function is threefold. One is, of course, supporting the physical structure, as MONETTE said. There's a lot of activity in that regards to allocating the budget to that. Two, I think one of the most important things that we face here is that, as has been mentioned, we're volunteers, we're not experts. But part of the BOLT mission is to make sure those experts get hired indirectly through the director with whom we appoint. So I defer to them. I would expect them to be able to do their jobs, to learn from them, and collaboratively help them do their jobs better with the experience I bring to the table. I am not an expert in collection building, in library policy. I hope to be better at it as part of this appointment, but I don't expect to be now. I believe my digital background can certainly help with the digital nature of things, and certainly with interacting with the community as a whole. I'm also very involved with elder issues as well, and I'd like to see more of that involved with the Reading Public Library. But in general, I think it's best served to leave it to the experts and allow us to actually support the director and their role and do the best job they can and be a voice of reason and helping them do their job. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Michael, same question.
Thank you. I think it's unusual that you have 4 people here who are largely in agreement. MONETTE said it quite well. Custody of the building, appoint the director, and library policies. I would also defer to experts in library science. They're educated on this. I am certainly not. However, I would say that the board has a role in oversight for the library staff, director as well as all of the staff. And it's critical that the board reflect the values of Reading and make sure that we have a library that is answerable to all members of the community. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we move on to our second question. Ms. Robertson.
Great. 2022 was the highest year for book challenges in recorded history, almost doubling the previous record high in 2021.
Yeah.
The vast majority of these challenges are written by or about LGBTQ+ or people of color and/or people of color. As a board member, how would you respond to being presented with a challenge to materials or events at the library?
This time we'll begin with Brian.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think it's a very important question, and I think it's, as a community, it is vital that we are inclusive and accepting of all people from all backgrounds. But there is a very important issue that we need to discuss this evening. Unfortunately, there are some highly inappropriate books that have been discovered in our teen section of our library. Books that show drawings of children performing sexual acts on each other, books that provide instruction on how to use sex apps and meet up with adults, and other obvious inappropriate content and language. I brought some of that content this evening, and given the highly inappropriate material that is in our teen section, I think it's important that the other candidates take a position on this matter. I've also brought copies for you, Alan, to take a look at, and also you, Catherine. These are images that our children get to see in our library. If we are not comfortable displaying these images tonight on RCTV, I'm wondering how can we display these images in our teen section? So I would ask all of the candidates to take a look at these images, and anyone that feels comfortable bringing this up to please display it to the TV, and please read the excerpts that are highlighted. If none of the candidates want to show the images or read the excerpts, I think it is quite clear that these images are not appropriate for our children and not appropriate for our library. Furthermore, this issue has been brought up to the Board of Library and library staff. They discussed it in March. There are images of children, as I mentioned, performing sexual acts on each other, and they discussed it in March, and they're going to do some research on that matter and make a decision potentially in April. I think it can be quite clear we can make that decision tonight if these images are appropriate or not. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Terry, same question.
I find myself in agreement with Brian on this one. I have looked at some of the books that he referenced, as well as others within the library in the teen section, and the notion that 13 and 14-year-olds have access to this is astonishing, frankly. I think it's inappropriate that these be in the teen room. Am I calling for banning of books? No, I am not. I'm simply saying that certain books should not be available to the general youth population here in town. I did look at the renderings that Brian shared. I've seen them before, and I had one constituent here in town write to me personally and ask if I believe that this meets the federal definition of child pornography. You know, I don't know if it does or not. I'm not a legal expert, but it certainly didn't meet the standard that I think is important that we maintain here in Reading. We're not talking here about banning things like Huckleberry Finn or To Kill a Mockingbird. These are not literature classics that we're talking about removing from the library, or at a minimum removing from the teen section. I think it's important that we take a stand on these while making sure that we do accept everyone in Reading. Every person in town has value. There's no way that we can get around that. There's no one who should deny that. On the other hand, we need to make sure that the printed material in the library is available only to those for whom it's appropriate.
Thank you. Same question, Ms. Verrier.
So I am very well aware of what's inside the folder, as there has been a challenge to our collection to have this book banned. As a sitting trustee, I cannot speak to this book in particular, as we have a pending request, which Mr. Curry referred to. The request did come in March. The trustees did discuss it in March and said we were going to come back and discuss it in April. Interestingly enough, the gentleman who brought this to our attention said that he was traveling in April and doesn't want us to discuss it without him in the room, and has requested that we postpone till May. So while I respect Mr. Curry thinking we should make a decision quickly, as a trustee, we're responsible for looking at this through all angles, and we will wait until May so that we make the right and proper choice. I want to make a couple of points about book banning in particular. Libraries are open and free, and it is not our place to tell anyone and their family what you can and cannot read, watch, and listen to. Each of us as parents has the right to make our own decision for our children. As far as programming, I noticed everyone just spoke about the book, but you also asked about programming. So I want to address that. Both Mr. Curry and Mr. Terry have made the point that all of our presenters at the library should be quarried, which is a pretty common challenge to programming in libraries across America. I want to make sure that they clearly understand that quarry checking is when a child is left unsupervised, and that word needs to be emphasized. All of our programming for children involves parent and caregiver supervision, so a parent and caregiver is required to stay with the child. All of our programming requires at least one library staff member in attendance, so at no point are children unattended. I want to make a correlation to, as a volunteer of the food pantry, every year our schools in town are extremely generous and do food drives for us. A volunteer goes to the schools to thank all the students and makes a presentation on the food pantry. No food pantry volunteer has to be quarried to step into our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Popp.
That's fine. Go ahead.
No, does he get his rebuttal?
No,
Okay, there's his rebuttal.
you go. I think it's
Ready?
good.
Okay, great.
Ready?
Hi, Cappy Pop here again. So I'm going to just talk about book bans in general. I think this falls under what I firmly believe is known as the Streisand effect. It's a phenomenon that came around in the 80s where Barbara Streisand tried to ban some photos, and they went absolutely what we would consider viral today. So the bottom line here is that the best way for this stuff to not see the light of day, for our teens not to see it in the spots they are, is to not talk about it. It's simple as that. I will guarantee you, my job as a digital executive has been to see, I will guarantee you that bad press is as good as good. No question about it. If you want this to blow up and have every kid see these images, the best way to do that is to talk about it publicly and to ban it publicly. It will get media coverage. And you know why? Because I guarantee you that 90% or so of our teens have something in their hand that looks like this, that gives them access to every bit of human knowledge publicly. They will take the title of this book, tap it in here, and buy it on Amazon before the end of the statement that we can make about it. Also, the ALA has very clear guidelines on this, and one of the ones that's great is like position 2. Libraries should provide materials and information presenting all points of view on current and historical issues. Materials should not be prescribed or removed because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. So do I approve of this? Of course not. Do I believe I have the right to ban it? Of course not. If it becomes federally banned, I'm 100% in support because that is a federal law. I believe there's a First Amendment play here, that it's protected by free speech. And to be honest, if we ban it, we're part of a 26 library network called Noble, and if other libraries don't, they can easily get a copy at Wakefield or Stoneham or wherever else. The easiest way to not have them do that is to not talk about it. So that's my firm belief. Thanks.
Mr. Curry, did you have a?
Yes, I had a rebuttal. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're all qualified. We all have a great skill set up here, and I think, everyone's doing the best they can. But I do think when we talk about book banning, maybe book burning, but book banning would be the correct term. I'm not aware, but are there Playboys in our library? Are there Hustlers? Are there adult films, pornographic films that people can check out? How many books are on ISIS, on how to join ISIS? Are there books on making pressure cooking bombs? I would hope all of those content are not at our library and using our Reading tax dollars to fund that. So book banning is a term. These are images that are in our teen section. In our teen section that says teens only. I passed out a handout to 5 or 6 adults this evening. No one has opened the images or looked at them and wanted to display them to the TV. Yet our children are seeing these images and they're not supervised and they're not with their parents. When you drop your children off at the library, you want to feel safe, you want them to feel comfortable, you do not want them to expose to items such as children having sex with other children or children having sex with adults. It is very clear, it's not even debatable. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move?
Yeah, I'll take it. Can I get a rebuttal for that real quick?
Sure.
I'm in agreement to some regard, but this one is what I think is critical, is every other thing that was mentioned was deemed pornography on the federal level, right? Everybody knows that. This has not been deemed pornography. There was a great statement, and I can't remember the quote, I wish I was, but it was a famous literary person who said, "I will never understand the impulse to suppress books written for children that deal with the world they're living in." And I think this firmly falls in that space. If it's federally banned, if anybody sees this as pornography, ban it immediately. Totally agree with that. But at the moment, it's not. And I don't believe we have the right to ban that. So that's my opinion. Thanks.
All right, you ready for the next question?
Sure. I have a feeling we'll be hitting this again, but my next question is, what is the biggest challenge facing our libraries in the coming 3 years?
And we begin with CAPPY POPP.
Thanks very much. I think we just touched on one of them. Everybody agree, huh? So I think the current political climate is the biggest one. It's not about what the issues are, it's about the opinions and people saying, hey, one side is being, given more access and more thought than the other. And I really believe that the greatest thing we can do and the challenges that we face are as simple as all of us sitting here going out and having a beer or a cocktail or a drink or a cup of coffee and talking through our differences. The world is changing so rapidly because, again, of these devices. Anything we do in the print section of our library is going to be outmoded and outdated before it's even put a sticker on it with our, our little code and put on that shelf. Somebody's going to have 5 revisions of it here. We need to understand how media has changed the landscape of our lives and have a policy or a set of policies or understanding policies of how we can better approach the rapid nature of our lives and the risks they portray. I think media bias has become rampant, and I think having programs, if not policies, in regards to understanding how media bias has changed our opinions of our community members, of our friends, people that we used to actually hang out with and like. A library should serve, and our primary goal, our primary mission of the Reading Library is equity, education, access, and accountability. Equity is the big one. So I believe that partisanship, banning of books, background checks, et cetera, just seems like an overwhelming indicator of a world gone crazy due to politics that don't need to be part of our library. It should be the absolute center of our community and should be equally accessible to all, both sides. Everybody should have an equal say. Thank you.
MONETTE VERRIER.
I agree with Cappy. I think political divisiveness is the biggest challenge that we face as a library. When I started as a trustee in 2018, it was for pure love of the library, love of the space, love of the collection, and that's what a trustee was about, was someone who really loved the library and wanted to champion it, not someone who wanted to put forward a political agenda. And I think that is the biggest challenge that our library faces, and it's the challenge that most libraries across America are facing. And I'd like to see us get back to a place where the library is about truly just loving the library. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Terry.
I think the biggest challenge facing Reading's library, and frankly any library in any town or university, is to remain relevant, as Cappy said a few moments ago. How do you take something that traditionally has been just print material and move it into the future, let alone the present? Our library director, Amy Lannon, said something really, really important recently, and that is that this is not your grandmother's library. And that's absolutely true, nor should it be my grandmother's library. Our library needs to be responsive to the needs of the community. It needs to have anything available that our people need to expand their horizons. There's that wonderful quote about, I got a library card. I'm now a citizen of the world, a citizen of history. That's what the library can do, whether it's through books, whether it's through computers, meetings, programs, or anything else that's to come down the road. The library needs to remain relevant for all of our citizens.
Thank you. Brian Curry.
Okay. So I also think technology is a key component of some challenges. Obviously, technology is a great benefit to society, and we have benefited tremendously. But I was actually speaking to a parent today, and they mentioned that, you know, over the years, they love going to the library, but their children have now seemed to gravitate to the computers. There's less time spent actually opening books and reading books, and there's more times where their children are spending time on the computers, and her point was,
huge challenge.
You know, this is something that it's not, certainly not the library's fault, because this happens at your home and in schools and a lot of places, but her point was it's almost a struggle and not worth the argument, because when I bring my children to the library, they don't want to read the books. They don't want to explore like we did 20 or 30 years ago. They're focused on the technology. So I do think that is a key component. I do think working collaboratively, and it's okay to have difference of opinions. To clarify a few things that were said earlier, the statute on child pornography is very clear. It should not be even needed to be stated, but it said federal law defines child pornography as any visual depiction of sexual explicit conduct. Any is a very broad term. That means anything. So these images that we referenced earlier, it is quite clear they're not appropriate, and they're not appropriate for our children. It has nothing to do with political or being divisive. These are our children. Our number one priority as adults, as parents, is to protect our children. And we should feel confident when they go to the library that they are being exposed to wonderful resources where they can flourish their development and grow, and not to be exposed to content that is highly inappropriate and sexual in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I guess that wraps that question up. Catherine, you have another question?
Sure. As a library trustee, how will you advocate for the library around town?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Terry.
I think the first thing I would do is write a letter to the editor and thank Reading's population for selecting me or electing me to be part of the board. I think then that I would work on the board to make sure that the town is made more aware more often of just what's happening at the library, with the use of social networks, with the use of old-fashioned print and sign. People can be more aware of what's happening at the library. As I said at the outset, we have a fantastic library here in town. I think that for those of us who are there 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, I count myself as one of those, we already know what's happening. But there are people who don't go to the library very often, and for them, they may be able to find a hidden gem in the Reading Public Library. We need to publicize it more, social media, print, etc.
Thank you. Mr. Popp, same question.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I think several things. First of all, I would say the digital aspect of the library. Now, I know that, I went online to look at all the different programs to see how many were children's programs in fiscal year 2022, et cetera, and all that information was available online, but I don't know if it was in the best format for dissemination. I wrote code literally to scrape it, to find it all. So I think actually making a lot of this stuff more digitally native and accessible to a wider audience, because to be honest, as a kid, I lived in the library, and I was actually shocked to see that the Safe Child policy of the library, which protects kids, gratefully, under age of 9 aren't allowed to be in there unattended, and I lived in the library as a child. But today's kids are digitally native. They're not going to go look at a website and scan through 7 calendars to find it. They need a way to see what's hot, what's now. So I think better ways of doing that would be wonderful. Also, I'm very passionate about involving elders more in the library per se. My family comes from a long generation, Aurora Healthcare in the Midwest. My cousin was director of elder services for over 30 years and has built some of the largest intergenerational programs in the nation. Bill Clinton gave her awards, and I would love to bring some of that program into Reading that has gone from basically preschool age all the way through memory care and everything in between. I think it's critical, and I think that's an underserved niche. Also, programs in general. Like, I didn't know half those programs existed until I looked, and they're great. But to that end, there's a lot of people that know a lot about a lot of things. Like, just look at YouTube. Tons of stuff out there. There's a lot of residents that could do programs at the library that don't require a lot of effort, that they could bring their knowledge to a wider audience, that doesn't require a media team and a million social media clicks to get by, that can help our community. So I would love to promote that aspect in town as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Verrier.
So I think I already do a pretty good job of advocating for the library around town. Just ask all my friends who like me to talk about something else occasionally. I think the library's done a phenomenal job. Recently, I don't know if my running mates here have had an opportunity to see it, but the Reading Public Library came out with its own app. So instead of just relying on the Noble app to access our catalog and our programming, you can now go to the Reading Public Library app. We utilize social media with both Instagram and Facebook, which is a great way to reach multi-generational across our town, while still producing print programming for members of our community who don't access the digital world. Certainly don't want to say there isn't room for improvement, because there always is, and as CAPPY points out, digital content is constantly evolving and changing, and we need to stay on top of it. I also think it's really important to advocate for library programming with our select board and our town manager. We do that through our budgetary process and sitting with FinCom and making sure that the library continues to get appropriate funding through the town, as well at the state level. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Curry.
So as many have mentioned, I think advocating for the library and promoting the programs and services, we have a very beautiful, state-of-the-art and inviting library, and I know many people in the town use it on a regular basis. I think it would be interesting to know, if it's not known, what is the participation rate in town, and to create that benchmark and then try to improve upon that. And I think there are ways that to improve upon that would just to certainly promote it through numerous media channels, social media, but also letting the residents know what programs there are available, what programs could be possibly expanded, creating maybe a job fair for high school students or college students, where members of the community could go to discuss their careers and provide mentorship to our residents or children in town. I think that would be one avenue. Other programs for senior citizens could be a way to advocate, because if someone has a positive experience at the library through a program, they're more than likely to then relay that information to their friends and family, and that would have a trickle down effect. So I think advocating is very important. I also think looking at programs and seeing what can be bolstered, and again, getting feedback from the community on what services our groups are possibly maybe flourishing, and what groups are maybe underserved, and trying to improve in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rebuttal?
Please.
Ms. Verrier?
Just want to provide some more information. It seems like Mr. Curry doesn't realize that half of our residents have a library card, which is amazing, and I agree with him. If we can get more residents to get a library card and use that as a benchmark, that would be even more amazing. Our library in FY22 ran over 500 programs. We have targeted programming for our seniors, and we even bring programming to the Pleasant Street Center. If you want to read a newspaper, make sure you go stop at the library. You can get a copy of the Globe, a copy of the Chronicle, a copy of the Wall Street Journal. Our library is available 24/7 through digital programming. You can get a book at midnight. You could stream a movie through Hoopla. You could get local museum passes. If you need Wi-Fi access, you need a computer, you want to fax or scan, you can do all of that for free. You can also take the opportunity to listen live music. There's a Women in Jazz concert coming on May 30th. And I want to make sure that I plug our new online database of over 150 years of Reading news, sports, and events, which was digitized through a very generous grant of the Reading Public Library Foundation.
So, are you ready for the next question? Okay.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit, but we're going to get a little bit further into programming. So what types of new or innovative programming would you like to see the library pursue?
Yeah, we'll start with MONETTE VERRIER.
Sorry. Thank you. I'd like to see the library expand some of its series programming. So currently, the library does a great series on job searching. So for individuals who are entering the job market, regardless of age, the library provides a great resource and recently put together some programming, which I think is extremely beneficial to do something in more of a series format. So I think the library and the librarians are looking to do more of that. I think that would be really powerful for individuals who are looking for additional help. I'd also like to see the library do more teen programming. I know this continues to be a challenge for our library as well as libraries outside of Reading. How do you engage our teens? How do you provide programming that is both interesting for them and attractive to them, that wants to bring them into the building and participate? As part of that, our teen librarian is currently revamping the teen room to make it a more welcoming space and a space that our teens want to take more advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Brian Curry.
Thank you. So I think as far as creating more innovative programs, as mentioned, there are many great programs at the library already, but like anything, I think you can work towards improving. I mentioned a career services for our teenagers or college students. I think anything that will increase foot traffic in the library should be looked at. I do think, and it's great that I know that 50% of the town has a library card, so that's something I did not know. I guess originally when I phrased my point, it was more about participation. We could have 100% of the town have a library card, but only 5% of the town using it. I'm not saying that is a statistic, but just a general note. I think having outdoor events, I've gone there with my children, story time outside with my wife and 2 daughters. That's been great, great events like that. You know, creating events that utilize that outdoor space would be great, very inviting, especially as the weather gets better, as we're all hoping. You know, and anything that just increases participation. As Monette mentioned, you know, teen programming is a challenge, and I think from my understanding, they have probably the lowest participation rate, lowest number of programs, and there's probably very justified reasons for that. Teens are very busy with sports and trying to get focused on life after high school. So, but I think they're also, you know, very important age demographic that we want to serve, and we want to continue that love of learning and that love of the library. So I do think focusing on teen programming would be a great benefit also. Thank you.
Thank you. CAPPY POPP.
Thanks much. Just to be on record first, as far as I understand it, Bolt can't influence programming directly. We can't make programs, but we can inspire and help the professionals. The library staff will be the ones to do that. To that end, I would like to say that it's amazing the number of programs fiscal year 22 they had. I was actually shocked. Like over 500 programs and 404 of them were in person. If you look at the whole thing, libraries open about 320 days a year. It balances out to about 1.6 programs per day. That's amazing. But there are other things I'm sure we can add. One thing I'm interested in, like I said, is more elder programming, more intergenerational programming. Be willing to work with everyone to figure out how best to serve them, especially in light of the new senior center. One thing that's been very relevant to me, especially working in my field, is job hunting for people who are older in the new digital world. I have had several people I know with experience like you could not believe who have spent maybe a day off the rack before they were rehired being completely unable to find jobs because they're not digitally native. I think that training is critical and would be very beneficial to our residents. Digital media training in general. People don't understand media bias. People believe still that if it's online, it's true. There's a lot of training, a lot of very easy training we can do to that end that I think people will probably not want, but probably deserve and should attend. Another thing is, I think Monette answered it well, is like series-based programming. There's a lot of places I know that are like teaching kids to start YouTube channels, for example. Stuff that's relevant to them today, I guarantee you will get a lot of participation, especially in the teen sector. I was in a meeting the other day where a guy said at his school, they asked all the teens what they want to be when they grow up. 70% of them said YouTube influencer as number one. We were astronauts and doctors. It's a different world. I think we need programming that reflects that. So, yeah, in general, I think the library's done a fantastic job. Like 168, I think, saw kids programs within 2022. 34% of like all library programming held in-house for kids. Wonderful job. Hope I can help. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Michael Terry.
Cappy, Abraham Lincoln said that you shouldn't believe everything on the internet.
Exactly. Exactly.
I salute the library. 500 programs in 2022. That's impressive. And I know that they covered the broad waterfront of topics and interest, both for young children, for teens, for adults. And I agree with Monette that it's been a challenge to get the teens involved in programs at the library. Typically, we see that teen attendance at these programs is just about 2/3 that of both children and those for adults. That's a challenge. I don't know how we do that, but it's something I'd like to work on with the board as well as the staff. Again, to Cappy's point, we don't make program as the library trustees, but we would have some sway, I expect. I'd love to see more history, not just on Reading, state, national, and world history, but also Native American history, different topics within history. I think that we should have perhaps programs in adulting for children and for teens. One of the things that a lot of people have decried online is that kids today, that automatically makes me sound ancient, but many children today don't have experience with adulting, which is things like how do you change a car tire? How do you balance a checkbook? Do you balance a checkbook? All these things are different than when I was a child. As Carla was alluded to, as Cappy's alluded to, the changes that we've seen make it a different world, and I think our teens need all the help they can get in programs through the library.
Thank you very much. Let's see, is that everybody? Yes. That brings us to the end of the questions portions, and we will now move on to the closing statements. And we'll use the same order that we began with. We'll start with Monette Verrier.
Okay. Once again, thank you, RCTV, Mr. Folds, and the Reading Post for this opportunity to showcase why I think I should be reelected to the Board of Library Trustees. In summary, I feel my 5 years of experience on the board makes me uniquely qualified to fill this position. My 20-year history of volunteering proves that I am committed to improving our town, whether it is actively participating in a school build campaign, volunteering at the Wood End Library, teaching CCD at St. Agnes, volunteering at the Reading Food Pantry, or working tirelessly to support the debt exclusion override that funded our amazing library renovation. I believe that our library is and should continue to be a welcoming place for all, providing a collection and programming that is robust and inclusive with something that appeals to everyone. The definition of public, when used as an adjective, is of or concerning the people as a whole. The the public library is for the whole community. I am committed to continuing to dedicate my effort and energy to ensure that our library continues to be the best library in Massachusetts. I will continue to steadfastly support the RPL's core values of education, equity, accountability, and access, and our mission to be a center and resource for learning and civic engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And second is Christian CAPPY POPP.
Thanks so much. As a candidate for Bolt and current resident, I'm committed to promoting access to knowledge, education, and cultural enrichment for all members of the community. I think my background in the digital space will be a great benefit to the library as a whole, and also my experience in elder and intergenerational programs. I believe the library should be a safe and welcoming space for everybody, including marginalized, underrepresented groups, and I'll work to ensure that the library is inclusive and diverse space as possible. I believe that the library exists and promote civic engagement, and I believe we need a lot more of that in Reading to stem the tide of partisanship and anger that we've seen. And I think consensus could be built there in very, very, very powerful degrees. And I also believe we need to expand programming into more intergenerational, teen-focused items, focusing more on the digital space. And I think I can bring a perspective, a unique perspective on that, and I wish the opportunity to do so. So I ask for your vote, your trust, and I thank you very much for your time this evening. Thanks much.
Thank you very much. And number 3, Brian Curry.
Thank you. So as I think it's clearly evident, we have a very talented group of candidates. We have a lot of different opinions, but I've been impressed with the content discussed this evening. I've certainly learned a lot, and I think the Reading voters of Reading have some really great choices for candidates. I think I would be a great candidate because I think it's important to work collaboratively with all groups of people. I'm an independent, registered independent voter, so I think politics doesn't have a place for making decisions. I think we need to make decisions based on data, based on feedback from the community, and based on common sense. I think consensus gathering is very important. And I think that would be something that I would look forward to working with the other board of library trustees as well as the library staff and getting feedback from the town. I'm well-rounded through my education background, time spent as a teacher and coach, and also my business career. I do think it's very important that we try to bolster and improve in areas we can through programs, but also doing that fiscally responsibly. And I also will advocate for our children and community and always make decisions that are in the best interest of them. Our children are our #1 priority. I passed out images this evening that are in our teen section. No one today has showed them to RCTV. No one has even opened them. If for some reason these images are not appropriate this evening, how are they appropriate for our 13-year-old or 14-year-old and our teenagers? You should vote for me. This is not why I'm running. I'm running because I want to, for a lot of reasons, but I will always do what's best in the best interest of our community and our children, and that's why I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Michael Terry, your closing statement.
Thank you once again for watching tonight and for hosting. I grew up in a family of 8 children, all of them fairly bright. I wouldn't say above average, but 8 children. As we've grown to adulthood, those 8 span the spectrum from, I will say, far right to far left. We occasionally lose sight of what we have in common, and that's been a challenge. What I've been able to do with both with my family as well as my friends who have different political views than I do is always find middle ground, always find what we have in common. Clearly, we're not going to agree on everything that happens at the library. It's not critical that we do. What's critical is that we treat each other with kindness, with respect, and that we always look for the best in each other and in our library on behalf of our children, on behalf of the citizens of Reading. I'm committed to that. I'm committed to that in my family, and I'm committed to that in this town. I ask for your vote on April 4th. I look forward to serving. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, we have reached the end of the forum. In closing, I thank all of the candidates for stepping up to serve the town of Reading and for taking the time at this forum to share your views and vision with the citizens. I thank Catherine Robertson for her questions. Thank you to Phil Rushworth and the rest of the staff and the volunteers here at RCTV for making this all happen. Finally, I urge everyone to get out and vote in the election Tuesday, April 4th. Polls are open at the Fieldhouse from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Early voting takes place Monday through Thursday at Town Hall during regular business hours. This is your chance to have a direct say in how your community is operated. Make sure you take advantage of that right and responsibility. Thank you for watching.